everybody, and welcome to another edition of Sports Speak, the 2021-22 NBA season preview. Hope you're glad to be here. We're excited to do it for you. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Quick little plug, of course, if you want to check out our weekly predictions for the NFL, our weekly pick'em is on Twitter for me and Tim. We actually had a perfect 6-0 week for once with our picks last week. So on Sunday, you can check out on our Twitter at SportsSpeak Live. But we have a panel here to break down the NBA season. We've got Rahill Jaiswal, Andrew Bellows, and Nick Pocchia in the boxes across the screen. And of course, I want to start things. We'll get to our finals predictions at the end. But let's begin with Kyrie Irving, which is probably the biggest story right now of the offseason. Most of the NBA is vaccinated in a league policy. They want players on the court. They want them to be vaccinated. And specifically in some of the bigger cities, of course, in New York and Los Angeles, have some even bigger restrictions. And the Brooklyn Nets made the announcement the other day that they do not want Kyrie Irving to be a part-time player. He will not be eligible until he's a full participant. Now, Kyrie is claiming that he's not anti-vax. He's doing it to support the workers. I don't really know what the whole logic is. But what I see, and as a Nets fan, is that this is the third season of Kyrie Irving just causing a lot of drama, which in the end causes him to miss games. We saw it last year on multiple occasions. The one time where there was him dealing with the mental health thing, which of course, is a serious subject, but then you see videos of him at some birthday party the next night. Like, I don't really know what's going on there. So I don't think it's really going to hurt the Nets too much if they don't have him on the floor, because frankly, they still played well with both Kevin Durant and James Harden out there, but he's really a detriment at this point. And it's not like they can trade him because his trade value is just completely gone away. So let me go to Rahill here first. Do you feasibly see Kyrie Irving stepping on the floor this year in a Brooklyn Nets uniform? And do you think he can ultimately have a positive impact on the team?
I do. When that is, I don't know. It doesn't look like it's going to be for the start of the season, but at some point he will step foot on the floor, and the Brooklyn Nets will be happy he does, because when Kyrie is out there, he's Kyrie. He does his thing. But in all, I'm just confused. This situation is just weird. I mean, he's had a lot of weird situations in the past. I mean, we all know he's a bit of a drama queen, sort of. Remember, he had the whole comment how he said that Kevin Durant was the only clutch player that could knock down shots, but he played with LeBron. But it just makes no sense to me. He claims he's not anti-vax, but he won't get vaccinated. But I think he eventually does step on the floor. I think he will get vaccinated at some point. I don't know when, but I think he'll miss the first couple games, but I think he'll be back on the floor, and the Brooklyn Nets will be just fine as long as they can stay healthy, because they didn't play many games together. But if James Harden played like he did before the hamstring injury, where he looked like an MVP candidate, along with now they have Kevin Durant for 5 years, and Kyrie Irving just, he does his thing at the point guard and he shares the basketball, they'll be just fine.
Yeah, I mean, James Harden was electric before that injury last year and really transformed his game as a distributor. So, Poach, I'll give it to you first on this, because regardless of whether Kyrie Irving is there or not, it's still a tough Eastern Conference. You never know with the Sixers, the Hawks, the Knicks, the Bulls, all on the rise. The Bucks, of course, the reigning NBA champions. With or without Kyrie Irving, do you think the Nets are still the favorites in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, to me, the Nets are still the favorites in the Eastern Conference. You have in James Harden and Kevin Durant, two former MVPs, two, in my opinion, top 6 or 7 players in the National Basketball Association, and it's a superstars league. In regards to Kyrie, I first want to make clear, at the end of the day, it is his decision whether he chooses to get vaccinated or not. That being said, when we look at Kyrie Irving and the past few seasons, prior to his falling out with, I guess you could say, LeBron and the Cleveland Cavaliers, I never thought of him as that guy to be a distraction to the team. I thought he was always basketball first. That was kind of like the first point when he forced his way out of Cleveland. Obviously, we had issues in Boston, and like you alluded to, every season now with the Nets, it seems like there's a new Kyrie Irving issue. As far as him potentially coming back, knowing how he operates, this is simply my opinion, he'll come back a couple months from now when the news cycle has died down, when Kyrie is no longer the center of attention, and he'll make himself the center of attention again by making this grand announcement that he's rejoining the Nets. I think it's unfortunate, and like you said, they can't trade him, right? Currently, obviously, New York and San Francisco are the only two NBA cities, I guess you could say, with vaccine mandates, but at the same time, not out of the realm of possibility that Philadelphia or other cities in California or any of these other numerous possible trade destinations would implement a similar mandate and that they do it soon. So you can't do anything with them. At the end of the day, Kyrie's going to do what Kyrie wants to do, but I think it's incredibly unfortunate. But getting back to the core 10 of the question, I think the Nets are still finals contenders, and I consider them the favorite in the Eastern Conference.
And one last thing, brushing off on Kyrie Irving, he said before he wants to retire as a Brooklyn Net. They were his fan favorite team growing up in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Like the question is, if they even were able to find a way to trade him, would he just back out? Would he try to retire from the league? I mean, he definitely wouldn't be someone who'd want to get shipped away, especially if he gets sent off to somewhere really that doesn't have much talent, because kind of maybe not the smartest front office would be a team that would potentially take him in at this point. But I do agree with you guys. I think we will eventually see Kyrie Irving on the court this season. I think he will eventually get vaccinated and the Nets will get him on the court, but it's just a bad precedent, and it's yet another story in the saga of Kyrie Irving. But let's talk a little about, this upcoming NBA season. Let's start with the off season. Of course, there were a lot of big moves, especially with the Los Angeles Lakers, the Chicago Bulls, just to name a couple of the most electric teams in the offseason. So I'm going to give it to Andrew Bellows first. What do you think was the biggest move this past offseason in the NBA?
I would say Kyle Lowry to the Miami Heat. For me, the Miami Heat are one of the best teams in the league. I definitely think they have a chance to win the East. They're a very well-rounded team, and Kyle Lowry is this effort player. He's constantly hustling, putting his body on the line. I think he's a fantastic addition to Jimmy Butler, same kind of player, does everything, puts his body on the line all the time. So Kyle Lowry, for me, fits the bill in Miami. He'll develop great chemistry with the players there, and I really think the Heat did a great job with this addition.
How about you, Tim? Biggest move of the offseason?
I'm going to have to agree 100% with Andrew. I think Kyle Lowry to the Heat was a massive, massive addition for this team. And if I'm not mistaken, because I'm not big in terms of following the Heat, but they still also have Oladipo coming back from injury as well, correct? So in that aspect, I really do view the depth for Miami as well really huge. I mean, again, you can have a front court, theoretically speaking, with Lowry, Oladipo, Butler, and a really stout defense in terms of the forward positions. I think Miami overall, and again, really the last 2 years, and let's be honest, really has been a very underrated team, has been projected around 500 or below, and obviously making it to the NBA Finals 2 years ago, in the bubble. That was huge. No one expected that. This year, again, there wasn't really that high of expectations. They were considered around a mid-tier conference team, but they played above expectations. And I think this Lowry signing for them is huge because of the fact that they now have more productivity, more capability of shooting, and really, again, can be that physical team that can go as far as they want to, as long as they're really healthy on the court. So I really also think while that Lowry signing is huge, again, it all comes down, in my opinion, to Victor Oladipo. How healthy can he be? And I'll also say this, not to switch topics about the Nets, but the same thing goes for the Nets. And what we'll see mostly throughout the Eastern Conference is who has the healthier team and the healthier stars. That'll come into play come the postseason.
Yeah, and I want to circle back actually to something I was talking about on my college radio show the other day with the Heat, but it kind of ties in with your point, Tim. This year's going to be a little different with the injuries because most of these teams got pretty much a full off season. Everybody's been off for 3 months or so. One of the reasons the Miami Heat did not look the same as they did when they made that championship run, and you could say this about the Lakers too, quite frankly, was that they only had 7 weeks between the ending of the bubble and the start of training camp for the following season. So Miami was definitely very worn out, and we saw them get a little banged up, but overall not play very well. And once they got to the playoffs against the Bucks, just really had no energy left. So I think it's going to be a little different this year with that. And I think while injuries could be an issue still, we're seeing it across sports. I mean, tons of injuries just with conditioning and stuff, but I don't think it's going to be as severe this year, just because of the fact that these teams have had a necessary breather and have gotten really an adequate offseason. But you never know with some of these teams in the Eastern Conference, specifically with the Nets, and I'd say the Sixers too, where you've seen some stars get banged up really on the regular. Let me turn it to Poach now. Your biggest move from this past offseason.
Yeah, to me, no question, it's Kyle Lowry to the Miami Heat. Kyle Lowry, the same way I feel about Chris Paul, maybe to a lesser extent, of course, but he's a winning championship caliber point guard. He's somebody who you bring on your team. He's a good culture guy. He's a good leader. He's going to win you basketball games. To me, I think there's a great chance, maybe not so much in the playoffs, but I think the Miami Heat may win 55 or 60 games. I think they're built like those Raptors teams we used to watch with Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, who would just win, win, win. He's a winning point guard. He's a great locker room voice, and I think that's going to be a huge addition for them.
So, Rahill, you in agreement that Lowry's the biggest move of the offseason?
I would, but I'm going to be a bit biased here, and I'm going to be a homer. I haven't been much about Knicks homer on this show at all, but I'm just going to go with Kemba Walker because I love Kemba Walker coming to the Knicks, coming back home to the Bronx. And yeah, he hasn't had the same production as he had in Charlotte, but Boston was just a real tough situation. Never got healthy. People were saying he was supposed to be Kyrie Irving. And I really like the move because for New York, their one problem was their offense was just inept in the playoffs because they had Elfrid Payton running the point. Now you replace him with Kemba Walker, who can create shots and get open looks where Julius Randle now doesn't have to go hero ball. And I think the Knicks are in for another good season. I don't know. I think they're going. I hope they're going to the playoffs. I pick them to go to the playoffs. I don't know about winning a series, but I have to be a little biased just for that.
Yeah, I think, and you mentioned it, Kemba Walker really had some big shoes to fill, replacing Kyrie Irving and previously Isaiah Thomas as point guards of the Boston Celtics. Now he's just going to do better than Elfrid Payton, which I don't think is going to be very difficult in Knicks uniform. But let's talk a little bit about overrated and underrated teams. We did this last year on the preview as well. I'll kick this off. I think an underrated team going into this season, it's actually still the New York Knicks. I'm not a Knicks fan, but you know what? I've seen this team and they played so well and they put up a nice fight against the Hawks, who ended up going all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals and giving the Milwaukee Bucks a run for their money. And I still feel like, despite being in New York, not that many people have talked about it, and the Knicks have still made improvements this offseason, Kemba Walker being one. And if you've looked at this team in the preseason, you've got now Taj Gibson scoring 20 points a game and completely transforming his game at 36 years old. There is so much depth on this team. Of course, the young talent as well. Year two for Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickley, and we saw the growth from day one of last season all the way through to the end of the year. RJ Barrett, they'll have Mitchell Robinson back healthy. This is a deep team that I think kind of still, despite being in New York and despite having won their first playoff game in so long, is still under the radar when compared to some other Eastern Conference teams. Like Rahill said, I don't know how far they could go, but I think there's a serious potential the Knicks could win a series and get to the second round, and I think they deserve a little more respect in the grand scheme of things in the Eastern Conference. On the other hand, an overrated team going into this season, I'm going to say the Denver Nuggets take a bit of a step back. I mean, I know that there's talent. I know Jokic just won MVP. I know they locked up Michael Porter Jr. on some crazy 5-year contract, and they do have Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon. There's some talent on that roster, but I just think the West is too deep, and I think there's going to be too many teams that are coming up on the rise for Denver really to contend. For those three kind of talented young teams between Denver, Utah, and Phoenix, I'd argue going into the season, Denver is actually the weakest of the three, despite playing so well last year. I think the Phoenix Suns are going to come back strong after their Western Conference title. I think the Utah Jazz are going to be hungry. They made some nice moves in the offseason. They added Eric Pascal, for example. I like the Jazz roster composition going into the season. Of course, the Lakers made some big moves. The Clippers are still going to be hungry. Dallas is beating preseason opponents by 70 points. The Warriors eventually might even have Klay Thompson back finally on the court this year in year two of James Wiseman. I think there's just a little too much hype surrounding the Denver Nuggets. So I'll go to Tim first for an overrated and underrated team.
Well, actually, first, I'm going to very much disagree with you in terms of the overrated team. In terms of ESPN projections going into this season, the Utah Jazz were ranked 5th. And let me tell you something. While, yes, they had the best record last season in the Western Conference, I'm not bought into the Utah Jazz. I'm sorry, as someone that's watched a lot of their games. This offseason, they turn around, they brought in Rudy Gay, you mentioned Pascal, and they brought in a lot of forwards. But where is your playmaker to help out Donovan Mitchell, who was your focus? And when Mitchell wasn't on the court, it was Jordan Clarkson taking most of your shots. Mike Conley is not what he's been expected to be for Utah. Sure, Rudy Gobert is great, and he's arguably the best defensive player in all of the NBA. But you need someone to shoot the basketball and be productive, and they don't have that third guy. Joe Ingles is as inconsistent as can be. Granted, last season he had a career year off the bench. They had 2 options for 6 men of the year, but at the end of the day, we've seen how his games go. He could score 31 game, turn around, and be even lucky to find a bucket the following game. This team lacks consistency, and it became very apparent last year in the playoffs. And the fact that yet again, the Jazz tried to compromise with forwards and physical defense over an actual productive shooter to help their offensive game proves exactly why they're going to come short yet again in the playoffs this year. Now, again, they're going to be a good team, but in my opinion, overrated. Now, my most surprising team, if it's not going to be Miami, which might I very add in terms of ESPN rankings, very appalled that this team was ranked 16th coming into the season. Because honestly, I think this is a team that, if healthy, can compete for an Eastern Conference championship. However, I'm going to go with the Golden State Warriors. Again, you mentioned Klay Thompson coming back. I think this team has a lot of expectations. If I'm not mistaken, too, they brought back Andre Iguodala. Now, granted the age, but you're bringing back a legacy of a team that once was and had success even without Kevin Durant there. Now, of course, you can't bank on the past, and I get that 100%. But Steph Curry had a borderline had he also not faced a few injuries through his time. But he had a borderline MVP season last year, even without Klay Thompson. And we know how electric Klay Thompson is. If he can be productive on the floor, trust that he's not going to get hurt again, this offense is going to be explosive. And you mentioned Wiseman as well being productive. I genuinely think, though, for this Golden State team, that they're going to be a lot better than where they were last year. I'm not saying they're going to win a Western Conference championship by any stretch of the imagination, but we cannot underlook this team's offensive capabilities up and down the floor.
All right, Andrew Bellows, over to you on overrated and underrated team.
See, I had trouble finding an overrated team because I think this year, especially, the teams are rated like pretty fairly, in my opinion, but I will have to go with the Chicago Bulls. Because I think a lot of people are rating them a little too highly. And frankly, I like what they've done, but you have to remember, you're chucking a bunch of new guys into a system, and you don't know exactly how that's going to work yet. You know, Zach LaVine has, I don't think, ever made the playoffs in his career. How will he perform in the playoffs? Lonzo Ball has never made the playoffs. Vucevic doesn't have that much playoff experience either. So you've jumbled a bunch of guys on a team that haven't played in the playoffs, don't have experience. And yeah, you can say DeRozan, but DeRozan is also 32, turning 33. And we don't know how he can, if he can carry a team to a Eastern Conference championship or far in the playoffs. You know, we don't know if he's going to be able to do that. So, you know, on the offensive side, I think this team looks great. But on the defensive side, I think it lacks a little bit. You know, Alex Caruso and Lonzo Ball are 2 great defenders. But other than that, I'm not seeing the inside defense on this team and really the wing defense either. So I'm going to have to say the Chicago Bulls for overrated. My underrated team is a bit of a weird one because they haven't done much this offseason. But I'm going to say the Memphis Grizzlies because they are, in my opinion, one of the best, one of the best young cores in the league. You know, John Morant, Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., and even Dylan Brooks. Like, I just love that trio going on. They're all good on both sides of the ball. And John Morant is one of the most athletic players you'll ever see. Dylan Brooks is one of those hustle players. You know, he gets a lot of fouls, but he can do a lot of good things on a team, especially on a winning team. You know, we talked earlier about, you know, hustle of Kyle Lowry. You know, I feel like that is kind of what is embodied in this Memphis Grizzlies team. And I think they're going to take a huge step up this year, even without making that many offseason moves, because these young guys are going to get more opportunities to shine.
How can you say the Chicago Bulls are overrated, though? They have the GOAT Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso reunited again. But yeah, Grizzlies are an interesting team, too. I mean, they've contended well, really, without any superstars other than John Morant, and Jaren Jackson Jr. started to really play well, and they've got some depth on that team. They'll be fun to watch. Rahill, how about you on an overrated and underrated team?
Underrated, I'm going to agree with you, Eddie, and say the Knicks. Just because of the reasons I've mentioned before. I also think the move of Evan Fournier was a great one because, again, he's creative with the shot making. He can get his own shots. And I really like them bringing back guys like Noel, who was brilliant defensively. Obviously, Mitchell Robinson will probably be the starter, but Noel's a great piece off the bench. And RJ Barrett hopefully will continue to take a step. Both RJ and Julius Randle really improved their three-point shooting. So nothing but positive for them. An overrated team that, and it's a bit of an interesting one for me. I'm going to go with the Dallas Mavericks. And it's not because I don't like Luka. I love Luka Doncic. I picked him to win the MVP last year. He was phenomenal in the postseason. But look at their roster outside of him. Eddie, you talk about inconsistent. How about their series against the Clippers? First 2 games, they shot the lights out. Next 2 games, they go cold. Game 5, they do it again. And Game 6, they don't shoot well. In Game 7, they don't play any defense. They do not, first of all, Luka Doncic, I love him, but he doesn't play great defense. No one on the team plays great defense. We've established that Kristaps Porzingis is, for some reason, refuses to use his height. He just likes to chuck up threes while he's 7'2" instead of getting down low. Guys like Maxi Kleba are extremely inconsistent. Same thing with Tim Hardaway Jr. These guys can, almost like Jordan Clarkson, Tim, one night they can come up, put 30 on the board. Next thing you know, they can't make a 3. And all of a sudden there's so much pressure on Luka Doncic, who hopefully will improve his free throw shooting. Because in the postseason, he was making 3s at a higher rate than free throws. So that's why I think it's the Dallas Mavericks being overrated. They'll probably still make the playoffs just because of Luka, but probably only as a 6-7 seed. I see another first round bounce. I don't see them making that much noise. But again, not because of Luka, just out the roster itself outside of Luka.
Yeah, and you really wonder if at some point, I mean, Luka Doncic is going to get fed up with not really being able to pair up with a superstar. Because you'd think if Doncic get paired up with someone, especially a big guy, really a power forward or a center who's elite, I mean, that could be an unstoppable combination. But let's go over to Poach lastly for an overrated and an underrated team.
Yeah, as far as the underrated team, I'm going to have to go with the Knicks as well, especially looking at when ESPN will do like the over-unders. A lot of them pegging the Knicks at 40 or 41 wins, which, seeing as they won a little more than that last year in a shortened season, I have to imagine this team is going to win more games. Obviously, we talked about Kemba Walker, 2 years, $16 million, I believe, an outrageous steal for a guy who's only a couple years removed from being an NBA All-Star, and I believe can bounce back in a big way. Also, I know we talked about Evan Fournier, a huge upgrade over Reggie Bullock from an offensive perspective. You look at that Knicks starting lineup, Kemba, Evan Fournier, Barrett, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson. That's pretty solid. That's a team that can absolutely compete in the East. And like we discussed quickly, Obi Toppin, just to name a few of the young players who are just getting better as this team adds more to their arsenal. As far as an overrated team, be a little bit controversial here. I'm going to go with the Lakers. Adding Russell Westbrook, obviously, is a big star move. Watching some preseason and just knowing his play style in general, I don't know how he fits onto that team. I think there's a narrative right now. Again, you'll see the ESPN graphics with like the Nets big 3 and the Lakers big 3 as if they're a shoo-in for the finals the way maybe some people feel the Nets are. And I don't think that's the case at all. You look in the Western Conference, we talk about Phoenix, we talk about Utah, we talk about Denver. I don't know if the Lakers are that type of deadlock championship caliber team just based on play style, because obviously there's something to be said about just putting a bunch of stars on the team, but how does he fit in with LeBron James? How does he fit in with Anthony Davis, talking about Russell Westbrook? That remains to be seen to me.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see with the Lakers. I mean, it's unprecedented to see this many older players on one roster, but let's shift gears a little to the opposite spectrum, the youth, because the Rookie of the Year should be interesting this year. Honestly, it wasn't the flashiest of draft classes. There wasn't tons of big names coming up, but I think there could certainly be some impact players throughout the draft. So I'll kick us off quickly on Rookie of the Year. I'm going to say that it's going to be Jalen Green from the Rockets. I just think he has looked so flashy out there. He's looked like a dynamic scorer just in the small sample size in the summer league. We've seen the Rockets draft well in recent years, especially with Tate coming through last year. Like there's some talent on this team, and the Rockets are certainly in a position where they'd like to improve after just having a terrible season last year following the James Harden trade. I think Jalen Green kind of steps up, coming through the G League, that Ignition League, kind of a different perspective from some other guys. I think this is a good spot for him to start to grow, and I think Jalen Green's going to win Rookie of the Year, though I do think both Cam Thomas and Jared Butler were picked really criminally low in the draft, and I think both of them could really be serious contenders for Rookie of the Year as well. I think they're going to have big impacts in their teams, especially Cam Thomas with the Nets. I think was a great pick there by Brooklyn towards the end of the first round. So let's go to Andrew Bellows first for his Rookie of the Year.
So I gave this one good thought. I love Jalen Green. I think he's gonna have a great season for Houston. I like Kate Cunningham as well for Detroit, but I'm gonna have to go with Josh Giddey from the Oklahoma City Thunder. I mean, this guy can do it all. He's a fantastic player, very, very good all around, and he gets a chance on a Thunder team that really only Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the only other good ball handler. So I think Josh gives me a lot of opportunity, a lot of minutes to shine. He's going to be really good in that system, I think. OKC, they have a lot of young guys, and he can kind of forefront that little movement they have going on there. And yeah, they're in the West. It's going to be tough for them. But I think they're going to really rely on him. They picked him 6th overall, so they've obviously got a lot of confidence in him. They locked Shai Gilgeous-Alexander up, and I think that duo in the backcourt is going to be really effective for them. And I think he's gonna win Rookie of the Year.
All right, it's interesting. So looks like we lost Tim into the nether, but that's okay. Let's go over to Coach instead here. How about your Rookie of the Year pick?
Yeah, I'm gonna take Jalen Green as well. When we look at this Rockets team, obviously, I guess you'd say in that rebuilding stage now, John Wall and the Rockets appear to be working on a trade, so there's going to be no shortage of scoring opportunities for Jalen Green. I think he's a phenomenal offensive player, and I expect him to put up big-time points and win Rookie of the Year. But I'd also throw in just kind of like a sleeper pick, James Bouknight from the Charlotte Hornets, another phenomenal young player who I think is going to make an immediate impact on that Charlotte team. Just keep an eye out on him this season as well.
I think it's phenomenal just how much depth there was through this draft, because in past years, it really feels like you're already boiling it down to 1 or 2 players that are definitely going to be Rookie of the Year. And this year, I think there's a legitimate 10 candidates who could be right there. Rahill, lastly, over to you, your Rookie of the Year pick.
I'm going to agree. I'm going to go with Jalen. I'm going to go with James Bouknight here from the Charlotte Hornets. I mean, you watch his highlights and you watch his draft stock. He can score any way which you want. You want to pop. You want to do it the 3-point range. He can do it. Take it inside. He can do all of that. Pairing with LaMelo Ball in Charlotte will really not only open things up for him, but for LaMelo as well. I think he's in a great situation. That's why I'm going to pick him to win Rookie of the Year.
All right, so let's move on now. Final 9 minutes of the show. Let's get into our MVP picks here. So I think there's definitely a lot of contenders for this as well. And we had a bit of a surprise last year with Nikola Jokic. I'll get us started here with my MVP choice. And I'm going to go with Kevin Durant. I think Kevin Durant is going to have a massive season with the Brooklyn Nets, whether or not they've got Kyrie Irving out there on the floor. Durant was so impressive towards the end of the last season when he really put the team on his back against the Milwaukee Bucks in that series. I like Kevin Durant potentially. I know we're talking about Harden as an MVP candidate. I think Durant, 15 years into his career, is going to win MVP. I think he's going to have a huge season there for Brooklyn. Let's start with Poach here with his MVP pick.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go with Giannis, go a little bit off the board here. Just watching him, he seems to have developed a bit more of a jumper now, working on that, working on quickening his free throw to be more of an offensive presence. From a shooting perspective, he's already a phenomenal offensive and defensive player, but I think he puts another one in the trophy case this year.
Rahill, how about you?
I'm going to go with someone who is a bit of an outsider and more of a not out of the ordinary. I'm going to go with Donovan Mitchell to win the MVP. And the main reason is I'm high on him. I know, Tim, I see it in the face just because the one criticism I had on Donovan Mitchell was the 3-point shot. But he has really improved that. He has the work ethic, and he averaged 27 points last season. And really, he, in my opinion, could have been top 10, top 5 in voting if he didn't get hurt towards the end. He was the heart and soul of that Utah Jazz team. I think the only reason the Utah Jazz didn't move forward was because of that ankle injury, because that prevented him from driving, and then he had to take tough 3-pointers, which he's not there yet. But I think he has a breakout year, puts everyone on notice, and wins the MVP.
All right, Tim, I saw your face. Let's get your MVP pick in.
I'm a big Donovan fan. I just don't believe that he would outdo Kevin Durant for MVP. I genuinely think this is Kevin Durant's year. I mean, you think about it for Kevin Durant. Ever since now he's come back from that injury, all he's continued to want to prove is not just the fact that he can essentially win an NBA championship on his own, but the other thing as well is that he wants to prove that he is better than LeBron. We know that whole little beef that he should be the best player on the planet, and I truthfully do believe that Kevin Durant is the best player on the planet. Now, don't get me wrong, Giannis is, well, very enticing. I think he's truly becoming a household name in terms of MVP every single year. But I really think Durant's going to step it up this year, especially with the fact that he's going to be having heavy expectations to be shooting a lot more along with James Harden without a Kyrie Irving on that offense.
All right. So lastly, Andrew Bellows, over to you, your pick.
Yeah, I think this is Kevin Durant's award to lose. I mean, the guy is just astronomically good at basketball. He's leading a Nets team that I believe is going to win the Eastern Conference. And I think this is his award to lose. He's just amazing.
All right. So let's finish off with the last topic here. NBA Finals predictions here for these final 5 minutes or so of the show. I'll get us started. I think the Nets are going to the NBA Finals, and I think the Phoenix Suns are actually going to go back. I think they are going to outlast the Lakers. I think the Lakers can make it to the conference finals, but I think Phoenix could outlast them. I say we get Nets Suns in the finals. At this point, I think this is where whether the Nets have Kyrie Irving on the court or not could make the difference, and of course, health as well. But I think the Brooklyn Nets do get the title this season. I think the Suns put up a fight. They go in 6 games, but I say the Nets over the Suns for the championship. Tim, let's get your pick first.
I actually 100% agree as well with you, Eddie. I think it's going to be Nets Suns. Listen, the Suns last year absolutely surprised. They had a great end to the run of the bubble, and this team continues to try to improve and get better every single offseason to build upon their depth. Now, the Nets, of course, with or without Kyrie Irving, listen, this team still turns around. They bring back Aldridge despite that heart condition, and they have a lot of opportunity to really build upon that depth that they got this offseason and try to be that physical team that they needed, healthy-wise, that they needed in the playoffs. I truthfully believe as long as the Nets are healthy, this team can do it. There's no reason with the unit they have that they should not win a championship this year. However, I will say this, one disappointment, not necessarily a team that was going to be overall disappointing, but I have to say this, for the Milwaukee Bucks, and I always talk about complacency a year after you win a championship. But overall, when your biggest signing and your biggest expectation player is Grayson Allen going into this year, that says a lot about complacency. Grayson Allen is a player, in my opinion, granted he was solid for Milwaukee a bit here, did not make it for Utah, turned around, got some big minutes at a developing in a developing team in Memphis. I don't think he is or should be your biggest focus going into this season after a championship. But yet, for some reason, he's their big player in the spotlight, of course, outside of Giannis on what he will do. But complacency, again, does not win you championships. The Lakers made that very apparent last season. So I think the Nets overall not being complacent this year is going to be a big reason why they won the championship over the Suns.
All right. Andrew Bellows, to you for your pick.
Yeah, I think the Nets are going to, I said it before, I think they're going to win the East. But I also think the LA Clippers are going to win the West this year. I think this is finally their year to win it. I believe they would have won it last year had it not been for Kawhi Leonard's injury against the Suns. Kawhi Leonard just provides a humongous presence on the court. And without him, I feel like they really lack that. So I'm going to have them going into the finals with the Nets, and I'm going to have the Nets taking it because I think Durant is just too clutch. Harden is finally going to get his chance to shine in the finals again. So I'm going to go with the Nets.
All right, Nick Pocchia, over to you.
Yeah, I hate to be redundant, but I'm going to go Nets Suns as well. I think the Brooklyn Nets, like I said, have 2 of the best 6 or 7 players in the NBA, 2 former MVPs, 2 phenomenal offensive talents. And with or without Kyrie, I expect them to get there. And then as far as the Phoenix Suns, I think they're still hungry. Chris Paul is a guy who's obviously looking for that championship, and I expect them to outlast the Lakers as well. And I'd probably go with the Nets in 6 or 7 at this point.
All right, finally, Rahill Jaiswal, your picks for the NBA Finals.
I thought Nets Suns was going to be a bold prediction, but I have the exact same thing. I have the Brooklyn Nets winning it all. I think the Nets, as long as they stay healthy, they're the team to beat. I mean, any one of those given players can beat you on any day. Harden, if you really wanted to, Harden can honestly wave off both of them and drop a 50-point triple-double if he really wanted to. So I think the Nets are just too strong. I'm not high on the Lakers this year. I don't think Russell Westbrook's move is going to do much. I actually think it's going to make him a little worse because he can't shoot the 3 ball. So I'm going to go with the Brooklyn Nets to win it all. But I do think the Suns are in for another good year. People sort of got, the wrong impression of Chris Paul there. I think fatigue probably had a lot to do with it because he played a lot of minutes in that Western Conference Finals. They've got the experience now going 8-0 in the bubble as well. So, but I don't think they're enough to take down Brooklyn. I've got the Nets beating the Suns in 6.
So we got a lot of agreement here in the finals, but we shall see how the season pans out. Season begins on Tuesday. Should be a great one to follow. Andrew Bellows, Rahill Jaiswal, Nick Pocchia, thanks so much for joining us today for preview here on SportsSpeak. All right, well, that'll just about wrap up today's show. Once again, you can follow along our NFL Weekly Pick'em on Twitter at SportsSpeak Live. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off on SportsSpeak. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend.